We are the Center for Advancing Health Outcomes. Research that transforms care, policy, practice, lives. Visit us at advancinghealth.ca.
Welcome to this special work in progress that we're hosting today, and we're doing it collaboratively with Providence Research. Of course, everybody wants to know about this new building, so you're going to learn a lot more by the end of the presentation, and we're going to ask that you save your questions for the end, and we'll do them all at once at the end. And as well, hopefully the pizza will be here soon and you can have some lunch and listen in comfort. Before we get going, I'd like to just acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and we're very pleased to be here and to welcome all of you. And for those online, if you're in other territories, please feel free to enter your territorial acknowledgement in the chat. And before I go to the next slide, I was just going to say that my name is Erin Cherban. I'm the Chief Clinical Research Officer for the Center for Advancing Health Outcomes. And there's going to be kind of 4 presenters today. Dr. Knight is not in the country right now, but he's provided us with a video. So we're going to watch the video first, and then we'll move on to the presentations.
Good morning, everyone. Firstly, my apologies that I can't be there to deliver these remarks in person. I was called away unexpectedly back to Australia on a family matter. The purpose of this town hall, however, is to update you on the progress made so far in the design of our beautiful new Research, Corporate Affairs and Physician Office Tower, the Clinical Support and Research Centre, or the CSRC. I was recently asked what the CSRC typifies and means to me. I told the person, and I quote, "Beautiful building, brilliant minds, horrible name." However, thanks to the St. Paul's Foundation, we'll be addressing that soon. And I can assure you that it will be much more than a beautiful building. One of the strengths of Providence has always been producing innovation, particularly in the context of healthcare. And in this context, innovation has always been a virtual bridge connecting patients with advancements in therapies and treatments. Now with the CSRC, we have a real bridge, allowing the bidirectional flow of questions and problems with solutions and implementation, together with the patients and clinician scientists working on them. Completing the ecosystem is an array of state-of-the-art facilities, some of the ones I'll mention below. So the CSRC has been deliberately designed with the understanding that all the great work done by you, our researchers, can't change the world if it doesn't leave our labs. So the building will be the vehicle that links discovery and clinical sciences and expedites technology transfer, accelerates new startup ventures, and provides substantial and varied training opportunities. Many ways, the jewel in the crown will be the Innovation Centre, which we're planning to be on the end of the Skybridge. It will be a dynamic facility that enables R&D, partnership and commercial enterprise, and will maximise our impact on the growth of Canada's life science and related sectors. Equally importantly, it will be a space that comfortably facilitates a range of conversations and collisions, from small one-on-one chance encounters in the coffee line, cross-functional small meetings, seminars, to full-scale events like our Skunk Works. There will be project or maker rooms or sandboxes, which will allow participants to engage in light prototyping, all designed to discover, nurture, and evolve innovative ideas quicker. What may be of some news to you is that Canada is a destination of choice for clinical trials, currently capturing roughly 4% of the global market, which in dollar terms is roughly estimated at well over $80 billion by the time the CSRC opens in 2028. BC captures roughly 25% of Canada's market. There is, however, a capacity constraint And that capacity constraint is around phase 1 or first in human clinical trials, particularly those outside of oncology. And this is important because these trials are the gateway to Health Canada approval. If investigative products that are discovered and produced by companies and academics locally start their therapeutic journey locally in Canada and in BC, this will benefit all Canadians sooner and will also benefit the economy. And to this end, most of you would have heard that the province late last year committed just under $4.8 million for us to establish and operate BC's first non-oncology phase 1 clinical trials unit. This will be a vanguard unit for the centralized and consolidated and fully supportive phase 1, 2, and 3 trial centre that we're planning for the CSRC. Right next to that is a simulation facility, which will blend real-life simulation with immersive digital capability to deliver interactive research, learning experiences, integrated working opportunities for researchers, staff, students, and industry. It will be attached to the CTU, enabling us to expand clinical trial capacity, improving accuracy, for example, by simulating the trial based on historical data. Simulation facilities are built to improve innovation in healthcare organisations by enabling systems of knowledge exchange, co-development and testing in real-life settings. Both clinical trials and simulation generate enormous amounts of data. And so we're really excited that the new campus is being deliberately designed as the most data-driven and digitally fluent health campus in Canada. Everything we do will see enormous amounts of data being generated, and this will only increase, particularly as we drive towards precision or personalised medicine. And so this purpose-built data centre is all about maximising the data for improving health outcomes with access for research, but it's also about generating partnerships. Innovation has always been a team sport, and Providence has had an embedded culture of strong local and national partnerships. The CSRC is set to expand and further develop collaborations, partnerships, and networks, both internally and externally. And we think the best way to do this is through a neighbourhood or precinct or community approach, which we'll hear more about from our speakers. This concept will provide the ecosystem where we can be bigger than the sum of our parts. It's an exciting opportunity for us to move forward while respecting the legacy and operations of the research centres and programs that we host and support. Jolyn and I are grateful to have Amanda, Devang, Megan, and Vivian from the development team to shepherd us through this monumental development, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We're also grateful that Scott, Beth, and Erin have taken on leadership responsibilities for the wet labs, dry labs, and clinical trials, and you're going to hear more from them coming up. So I'm not going to steal any more of their thunder. I will say thank you. I will say I look forward to your feedback and talking to you about this exciting project when I return later in the week. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to just quickly expand on some of the concepts that Daryl mentioned in the video, just because he's not here to talk about them, and to give you some more information about the building itself. So what is the CSRC? And again, we all acknowledge that that's not going to be the name in the end of this center, but it is the Clinical Services and Research Center. It is a multi-purpose building that will accommodate a lot of the functions that are currently they won't be able to go into the new hospital build. It's going to enable the functions that span Providence Research, medical, clinical, corporate services, along with the Child Care Center and the Innovation Center that Daryl mentioned. It is a 12-story building that will be connected to the core hospital with a 2-story sky bridge. And research will be located on floors 3, 4, 5, and then 9 to 12. So you can see it's going to be a mixed-use building. There'll be corporate services in there and a child care center. And on the main floor, there's going to be retail space as well. As Daryl mentioned, the real purpose of having all of these groups together in one building, very different from the way we function now, is to make sure that there are a possibility to integrate multidisciplinary collaborations so that we can work together more closely across all the different centers and clinical spaces, to activate the research community and to amplify the ability to do research at Providence. We're very high performing for the size that we are, and we want to ensure that we can provide even more services and ability to perform even more and different kinds of studies and research in the future. Right now, the business plan has been approved and the funding's been announced. And then the major procurements are complete. So it's Diamond Schmidt Architects, and they did the Sick Kids design in Toronto. So if you ever go to Toronto, have a look at that building. It's downtown. It's a beautiful building to see. And so we're pretty excited about having a space that will kind of look similar. It'll be bigger than the space at Sick Kids. Kristen Wright Architecture, so they're doing the design support for Diamond Schmidt, and then PCL is doing the construction. So here is the building. I don't know how well, oh, you can see it on there, great. So we tried to give you a look at the building so you can see where everything is going to be located. So of course, over here is the main hospital. And here's the sky bridge going over, so floors 7 and 8. Today, we're going to be talking about various floors in the building, not so much the Innovation Center. I'm going to talk shortly about floor 4, which is going to be the Clinical Trials Unit and the Simulation Center, as well as Physiology Lab space. And then there's the ground floor you can see there, and the Child Care Center. And so it definitely is a work in progress. We're getting there slowly. And just to give you a sense of the floor sizes in this building, this is the current Providence floor space. This is the size of the floors in the CSRC compared to the size within the new St. Paul's Hospital. And one of the things that Daryl had talked about having collaboration and collision spaces is moving to a neighborhood model, which is something that they've seen and I've seen as well in different centers that I've visited across Canada. All of the new research centers are set up this way. Research is grouped by theme or focus rather than by centers. And teams that are doing similar types of jobs, ideally they'll be seated side by side. There is no private office space in this building. We've been referring to the private offices, well, the office space as focus rooms. And those are places that will be bookable. And there's a lot of bookable space, meeting rooms. There'll be a system to do this that will be implemented that will be agnostic of all the centers. The benefits, as Daryl mentioned, for the neighborhood model is that people that are doing similar types of work or that want to do similar types of work can be seated with each other and use the space they need to at the time they need to. There's more opportunity for sharing and collaborations. We want to be agile because, as we know, research changes quickly across the spectrum of translational research. So we want to be able to implement new innovations as quickly as possible in this space. And there's going to be a lot of space, drop-down spaces to increase the usability of space. So space could be reconfigured or used as people see fit. So there'll be a bit of organizational change for all of us as we move into this new space. And really, as I just said, the neighborhood design principle is future focused, allows us to be flexible, and can be broad and inclusive. So I'm just going to give you a quick update on the clinical trials working group. I'm the chair of that working group. So here's the structure that we've set up for now, the org chart, and then the steering committee you can see here. So Scott, Beth, and myself are members of the steering committee, along with the development team and different individuals from Providence Research. And then the clinical trials working group, we have a very wide swath of individuals who happily have stepped up and have volunteered their time to help us design the clinical trial space as we get there. Here's the purpose of the group. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this. It's really just to communicate updates as we're doing today, provide input into the design, talk with the architects. So we've spent a lot of time in the last few months with the architects trying to get the drawings right, provide direction and guidance. And really, we haven't had any issues to escalate at this point, but we'll see what happens as we get closer to the design phase. So I know it looks weird, but desired scope is the clinical trials and simulation space. We're currently waiting for more information about funding for this space, so that's why it's not drawn in at this moment. What we've been able to do on this floor so far is the physiology rehabilitation lab space has been designed, as well as 2 phlebotomy and interview rooms that we know will be in the space. There'll be more of those in the CTU when we get to that scope of drawing. So we've met monthly, and again, thanks to everybody that's participated. We have focused on the physiology rehab space and the interview and phlebotomy spaces. It's amazing how much time you can spend talking about even something as small as those. We're waiting to get information about the funding for this space, and we'll continue to review the plans as they come along. And we have been looking at CTU spaces across Canada and around the world. So the intent in the space is to use any of the current best practices that are available. So we've seen some really beautiful and very functional spaces. We've also seen some very beautiful and non-functional spaces. So we want to make sure that this, again, is as flexible and nimble and designed as well as possible to service everyone that's available to use the space in Providence. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Beth Snow.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Beth Snow. I'm the head of evaluation at Advancing Health, and I'm also leading the dry lab working group for the CSRC. So I'd like to also thank the working group members coming from different centers across Providence Research to think about how we use dry lab. And dry lab, if you're not familiar, is about those spaces that aren't the wet lab and aren't the clinical trials units. So thinking meeting rooms, what would traditionally be called an office, but we're referring to as a focus room because it's where you can do focused work. So we're really thinking about how do we use space and how do we find the space that works best for all the different types of work that we do. So the dry lab space will have a variety of different kinds of workstations, these focus rooms, different types of formal and informal meeting spaces and collaborative spaces. And so the dry lab group has been getting together, talking about what are the different types of work that we do and how can different types of spaces help support that, and meeting with the architects to then look at how do we lay out all that space. So dry lab space will be located on floors 3, 4, 5, and 9 to 12, and I'll show you a couple of the diagrams of those. It's primarily along the western and northern parts of the building, and also the Innovation Center that was mentioned earlier is available to researchers from dry lab, from wet lab, from clinical trials, anyone who wants to use those. Those are a shared resource. So this is example of level 5, and the green area is the dry research. So on this floor, there's going to be some corporate space, and then there'll also be some dry lab space. And these drawings aren't finalized. We're working with the architects to look at different configurations of, where do different workstations go, different meeting rooms. There'll be respite rooms. There's all sorts of different spaces. Trying to think of all the things you might do in a day or want to do in a day. And also thinking through like all the details, like, there's kitchenettes. You don't want the quiet space to be near the kitchenette where people are chatting over their coffee. So thinking through all those details of how to lay this out in the best way possible. This is level 11. So you can see here the blue area at the top is some wet lab, and there's a lot of dry lab in this space. So, when people are working in the wet lab and then they want to go work on their data, there's some close by dry lab space for them to work. And again, even just to also be able to see what each other are doing and interact with people from all the different research centers and our independent academic groups as well. Level 12, this has a lot of other wet lab and core and a little bit of dry lab. So it's kind of interspersed throughout the building. Again, wanting to have people nearby to each other in different ways to foster that innovation and those collisions where you know, talk to someone and realize your work is a lot more similar to theirs than you'd realized. So the principles, as was mentioned earlier, are really around flexibility. We're trying to plan a building for the future. So it's not just about how do we work today, but how might we work in 5 years, 10 years, 25 years, and beyond. So being flexible and being able to move things around and have them modular as much as possible, really fostering collaboration, and being able to book the space that meets your needs for whatever type of work you're doing. So we've also visited some other places. A lot of new buildings are using this kind of approach. So we went to the new Deloitte building that's downtown, learned from them what's working well and what's not working well, and what kinds of pain points they're having that we can maybe avoid. So like one of the things they said was having a lot of phone call rooms, right? So we all have to take a quick phone call or take a quick Zoom call. We have meeting rooms of various sizes in this building. So if you want to meet with one other person or 10 other people, if you want to do it in a really formal boardroom setting, or you want to do it around some couches, all of those things are going to be somewhere for you to easily get to, formal and informal. And also we've been talking a lot about the privacy and security. So we know we all work with data that's confidential. So how to balance having that open collaborative nature, but also protecting the data that we need to protect. So that's all being sort of factored into the design. So much like the Erin mentioned with the clinical trials working group, we've been meeting with the architects to review plans, provide feedback, look at new drawings. So we've reviewed some of the floor level designs, and we'll be moving on to kind of what are those room level designs going to look like, visiting some other sites. And then once the design is signed off, we'll be talking about operational planning, because there's a lot of work of just how are we going to operationalize the building. And we'll have a few years to do that. So lots of opportunity for people to bring forward feedback and contribute to how we're going to bring this building to life. And I will now pass it on to Scott.
Oh, hi, everyone. So, yeah, my name's Scott. I'm going to represent the wet lab design for the new CSRC. So, and for those that I think I'm going to do a quick, this is what I do. I get people to interact. So the people at home, please feel free to join in. But I want to, anyone who works for the Center of Advancing Health, can you just quickly stand up in the room? Okay, excellent. Okay, you can please sit down. So, okay, so anyone who works for the Center for Heart Lung Innovation, can you stand up? Okay, and anyone works for Center of Excellence for HIV/AIDS? Anyone here or any other center? There were a few people who didn't stand up, so obviously don't want to stand up, or they're sort of visitors or independent people. So I just wanted to sort of illustrate. So we're all, a bunch of us are in the same room, right? That's never happened before. It rarely happens, right? And that's one of the things I'm excited about the CSRC, because theoretically, we're all going to be munched in together, and we kind of can learn from each other. We can sort of synergize and sort of just have a more interesting career, I think. So that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to. And I think if we do this meeting again, it would be good to say the Center for Advancing Health people can merge across with the HLI people and others. And I think that's one of the big opportunities for this new, we're very privileged to have a brand new research center built for us and paid for us. And so I think it would be fantastic. Anyway, but for those of you who are from the Center for Advancing Health, and some of you from HLI, what do we do in wet labs? Well, that's where we have all the beakers and the conical flasks and test tubes and all these crazy little chemicals and things. So that's roughly what we're up to there. So, but let me go through some of the pictures and show you what we've done so far and how it's going to look. Okay. I just suddenly realized, how do you drive this thing?
You can just.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the most important thing is to thank my colleagues who are on the working group, right? So I chair the working group, but there have many people involved heavily on this. They're giving up an awful lot of time. We're talking about thousands of hours across all the different working groups and steering committees to sort of get this thing done. So, you know, there's other people involved in this as well who are sort of brought in as technical specialists for the various core facilities in the wet lab. So we'll go through in a little minute, but you know, it's important to acknowledge our colleagues who are doing a lot of work on this stuff, because they're taking a lot of time out of their normal research programs and activities to assist with this. And most of these people are either HLI or the Centre for Excellence for HIV/AIDS, where most wet lab activities are carried out. If there's anyone here or online who does wet lab research that is not part of HLI and Centre for Excellence for HIV/AIDS, please reach out to us, because we need to talk to you as soon as possible. So, the wet labs. So mainly the wet labs are going to be on levels 9 to 12. So we are up on the top floors, which is nice, along the western and northern portions of the building. Okay, so but the combination of generic wet laboratory space and core facilities is what effectively makes up the wet labs. Okay, and I'll go through those in a little bit more detail in a minute. So generic wet labs with open benching will be located on floors 9 to 11, so not on the very top floor. Okay, we have these things called core facilities. So these are very specialist type laboratories. They have, you know, world expert technical staff and managers who are really good at what they do. Okay, so these are people who can share their expertise and their resources and capacity across many different research programs. Okay, and so on level 9 we have a tissue culture where we grow cells either from humans, being donated from humans, or they could be cell lines or anything like that. There's even a tissue culture with specializing in stem cell growth and things like this. So that's the tissue culture. On level 10 we have again another set of tissue culture laboratories. We also have cellular imaging where we actually take, you know, we use special microscopes and imaging machines to actually look inside tissues and organs and things like this at a high resolution. On the level 11, again, another tissue culture. You might get in the feeling that tissue culture is an important thing. It is, and the main manager is over there. Gurpreet, put your hand up. Okay, so Gurpreet has been spending a lot of time helping to design these tissue culture laboratories. So she's really excellent at this. So if anyone wants any questions about cell culture and tissue culture, go talk to Gurpreet. I know nothing about tissue culture. But the other thing that's exciting on level 11 is we have this bioengineering, bioinnovation. So this is kind of a new core facility, sort of led by Zachary Laxman, who's cardiology training. And so he is actually using stem cells to regrow heart tissues and things like this in his team. So that's going to be an exciting aspect of the new facility. Their current labs are pretty grim labs, right? So the ability to actually have brand new labs on the 11th floor of the CSRC will be fabulous. And we're hoping that we can have clean room facilities. They can grow new organs effectively, hopefully, and see how they go. So the Center for Outcomes Evaluation, or Advancing Health and Outcomes, you can do some more research and say, okay, how do these work in the long term and things like that. So that'd be quite cool. Level 12, as I say, there's no actual generic wet labs on level 12, but there's going to be there will be tissue culture. It's not listed here. It's a little tissue culture lab, but mainly it's going to be biobanking. So that will house 2 major biobanks at this hospital. One is the Bruce McManus Cardiovascular Biobank, which is led by Ying Wang, who's an assistant professor here. And the other one is the Jim Hogg Pulmonary Biobank, right? And so that's led by Tilly. Tilly's probably online. I don't see her here. Tilly Hackett. And so these have been going for years and years and years, and they basically donated organs, lungs or hearts, respectively, or parts of these organs, and they've been biobanked and stored in appropriate ways for future study and current study. So these are huge resources that have been grown within this hospital. And hopefully there'll be new biobanking initiatives as well, sort of bringing in other biobanking initiatives across the research community of the St. Paul's Hospital and further. There's going to be histology. So what's histology do? Histology takes tissues and organs, slices them into tiny little slices, really thin slices, does all sorts of weird chemical stains, and basically says, okay, you've got some T cells in these tissues, and you're basically going to say, okay, you've got T cells infiltrating a heart transplant sample. Oh, you might be rejecting your heart transplant. So that's what that's what histology can do, and they do this all the time. I think is Amrit here? Samurai? No, she's not here. Okay, so I can't pick on these people if they're not here, but hopefully she's online. She's probably busy slicing tissues up right now. Okay. We also have the molecular phenotyping core. So this molecular phenotyping and genotyping core, and I see Beth and Bashak, put your hands up over there. So these, Beth and Bashak run that unit at the Center for Heart-Lung Innovation, and they already work with a lot of other researchers across this hospital. So they're really sort of used to receiving specimens, working these specimens up either with flow cytometry to look at different types of cells in a particular specimen, or even looking at within the molecular makeup of these cells as well. They do DNA studies, RNA studies, proteins, metabolomics, and all sorts of things like this, right? And then we have this preclinical facility, which is really the animal facility that currently is down in the basement, but this time it's going to the top, right? So if you have mouse models, they've been a bit troglodytish, the people who work with there and the models. Now they get the penthouse suite of this building. Okay, and we also have research support spaces, and this is more buried down in the basement. So P1, so parking level 1. I think there's multiple parking levels. But P1, we're going to have a freezer farm. We have massive, dozens and dozens of -80 freezers that will store a lot of the samples and store them appropriately for years and years, so we can study what's in these samples. There'll be, obviously, we do generate, that's one of the bad things of the wet lab people, we do generate a lot of waste products. And so it's biological and pathological waste. So this will be handled in there and taken off site in appropriate biosafety approved ways, like it does now, but this is where it'll be centered a little bit. We also have a micro CT, so computed tomography, to even look at even better resolution of tissues to see what's going on in these tissues that have come from our patient donors. We'll also have central stores. You can go and buy tubes. We always want to buy test tubes and things, so that's what we do. So that's we need to go somewhere where we can buy these things. And also on levels 9 to 11, we'll have distributed storage spaces, again, some sort of biological, pathological waste areas, chemical storage, and equipment storage. Okay, so this is just a sort of floor layout of the very top level of the CSRC, level 12. Right? And as Beth said, in the bottom left-hand corner is dry research. So there'll be a lot of desking areas, shared meeting rooms, focus rooms, and things like this, where people can move out of the wet labs, or even, it would be fantastic, some of the people from Center of Advancing Health. This is the place to be, right? This top floor, you're going to get the best views in town and the best views of the people doing their wet lab work as well, right? Because we're hoping that the adjacencies between the wet lab areas and the dry lab areas will have sort of transparency, so people can look in and say, hey, what are you doing with these specimens? So if you ever want to see a heart dissected by Ying and her team, this is the place to be, right? Because above there, you've got the biobanking core, tissue, and other specimens. So this is where the action, the rubber hits the road for the wet labs. Next to there is histology core, molecular phenotyping core, and on to the north side is the preclinical core, okay? And if you want to know where all your data is going to be stored, it's in the data center there. I don't know nothing about computers, so it's in there somewhere, right? If you've lost your data, it's there. Okay. So, but that's, that's all very well and good. And we've got to the point where we know where these things are going to be located now. but what about other things, right? So this is the sort of the next layer of detail that we've been working on, the teams have been working on. So it's the same level 12, right? But you can see now we're sort of starting to have internal rooms within the core. So we now know where those are going to be, how many square meters each room has to be in order to be functionally effective for whatever it's going to do, right? This could be slicing tissues from an organ, tissue sections from an organ or whatever, right? So, or measuring DNA in a particular blood specimen or something like that. So we've now got to that point. What we're going to do next is work out what's going in those rooms. So benches, where do the benches need to go, right? Where will these specialist pieces of equipment, these instruments need to be plugged? The electrical sockets are where taps, sinks, and all these types of things have to go as well. So that's what a lot of people have been working on. This is level 11. Again, mainly dry research on this floor, but on the top right-hand corner here, the northwest quadrant of the CSRC is where we have generic wet lab in the sort of lighter blue colored. And then to the right of that, we have, it's really hard to see, I didn't blow it up enough, but this is where the bioengineering, the new center for there will be situated, where we hopefully, Zach and his team have just recruited a new professor. She's coming in from Toronto, and so she'll be starting later this year, and she's an expert in tissue engineering and all these amazing things that they can do now that will push Providence Research into the next quarter century, sort of this cutting edge wet lab type activities. Right? So that will happen there, and the bit lower down there, you can probably read it, that's one of the tissue culture banks. So basically a series of 3 or 4 rooms dedicated to growing cells, reproducing cells and things like that, so we can study these things. Moving down to level 10, a little bit more generic wet lab, but side of cellular imaging and biophysics. That's where we can have all our microscopes and other fancy instruments so we can actually look inside cells, look inside tissues and things like this, right? Again, you can see the tissue culture to the right-hand side of this image. I'll do a little bit more show and tell on the wet lab stuff. We're still working through what exactly these generic wet labs will look like, but I can show you a little bit about that in a minute. And then on level 9, in green, in the sort of the southwest quadrant, that's where the Center for Excellence of HIV/AIDS will have their wet laboratories. They're clinically accredited because they do actual testing of patient specimens that would tell the clinician what treatment a patient would necessarily have, right? So that has to be, there's very clear clinical testing guidelines related to these types of laboratories. So not everyone can just go into these labs at all, right? You have to have very important reporting guidelines for these things. That's why the CFE wet labs are sort of cordoned off into one little area for themselves there. But they're going to be also part of the wet labs and dry research areas as well. Okay, so, I talked about these generic wet laboratories. So these are going to be sort of open benches. I'm not sure, hopefully some of you have seen what wet bench looks like. It's just a bench, right? Just like a kitchen counter, right? The cupboards and shelves below and above where you store your chemicals and things like this, and it's somewhere to work, just like this thing here. That's all it is, really, okay? But where do you put these things? Because you have hundreds of researchers, hundreds of trainees who are learning how to do wet research and things like this. And then you've got, on the lower part of this, we have this thing called flexible alcove zone. So what exactly is this? So this is where potentially would be, you have a whole series of fridges and freezers. In your own kitchens at home, they kick out heat, these things, right? Quite a lot of heat. When you have -80s and -20s in a research laboratory, they kick out a lot of heat and a lot of noise, right? We have sonicators, other pieces of instruments that you do not want on your kitchen counter. You want them sort of siphoned away in a sort of an alcove where they can be shared by other researchers as they need to, depending on the activities they're doing for their research project. And we're sort of in the process of designing the needs of these flexible alcoves, right? So, Mari DeMarco, who's a clinical chemist here at St. Paul's, she does a lot of research using mass spectrometry. So these machines are massive, right? They're like bigger than small cars, some of these things. So she needs larger alcoves to house all these things as well, but she probably doesn't need as many benches. So these are the types of wet laboratory alcoves we're sort of trying to sort of figure out what is the requirements across the research community at Providence Research. So, you can read some of these things, but I think what we're trying to do is get an inkling of the kinds of things we want, so we don't miss out on any potential advancements in the future. And we can have custom alcoves as well. So I know some researchers, they generate an awful lot of imaging data from tissues and things like this, but then they have to have very complex computational infrastructure to analyze it. So it could be that, there might be a set of computational monitors and desktop computers that are directly plugged into the servers in a custom alcove or something like that, right? Or they might be part of the dry research lab space as well. Okay, so that's pretty much my comments. I think we're open for questions and other comments from everyone. Thanks.
Yeah, we're definitely open for questions. I was just going to say, maybe we'll get the pizza put out. We can do pizza and questions at the same time, because I know everybody's looking that didn't get pizza so far is hungry. So I'm just going to take 1 minute to let our staff do that. But in the meantime, as that's happening, please feel free to ask any questions that you may have that we haven't answered in the presentation.
I have a question for Beth, actually. I know for a long time, like open office spaces were sort of in vogue. And then there was some sort of mixed reviews in terms of having like a huge office that's completely open. And they've moved to sort of semi-open design. And I'm wondering what the thought is.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was that not everyone loves open offices, I think is sort of the gist of that. So the way we've been looking at it, it hasn't been exactly settled, but we don't want to have a giant sea of desks. Like nobody likes, this is a very, very big floor plate. No one wants to see for miles just desks. So we are looking at putting like meeting rooms that will break up the sea of desks. So there'll be more like smaller zones. And then thinking about, again, we're trying to think about all the different ways people like to work. So when we were at Deloitte, they had what were called like library zones and studio zones. So if you want to work in a space where no one's going to be talking, you book in the area that's that quiet zone, so you can focus in your, and not be interrupted. But if you want to be able to chat with your colleague, like often people are going to book spaces for the purpose of working with their colleagues or working with a collaborator that they want to learn more about their research, you book in a different zone where it's okay to turn and have a quick chat with a colleague. Or you can also get up and go to a meeting room. So part of it will be about how we operationalize the space, and part of it will be about creating zones so that we don't have a sea of cubicles. We'll just get the microphone so that people online can hear the question.
It's just a general question because there won't be any office space as there are now. So for the PIs from the research side, right now their offices and they have their I'll say belongings means files and all that stuff. So if it's a bookable space, so where are they going to store those things rather than bringing it every day? So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, there will be storage. And again, like this hasn't been decided exactly what it looks like. That's part of what we're designing now. But there will be storage in terms of like research files that need to be locked away, in a cabinet, that type of thing. Other possessions, there'll be locker space that people can use. So you don't want to have to carry, maybe you have an ergonomic mouse that you use and you don't want to have to carry it every day to the room you're booking and home. There'll be space to kind of secure any belongings you want to have, or your favorite mug or whatever it is.
Are you going to have accessible spaces for people with disabilities, invisible disabilities? How is the accessibility?
Yeah, I think this is a really great point around accessibility. So there's going to be space policy. There's also, HR has policy around people with disabilities and any accommodations that are required. So that work, again, will happen when we operationalize the space. So I'm not an HR person myself, so I can't give any details, but I know that that's on the radar of things to look at. I don't know if you have any other thoughts there.
No. So is that going to be on each center and each employer, or is that going to be built into the building?
I mean, it's an operational thing, so I don't know. That hasn't been decided. I know it's on the radar of things that need to be put into operational planning, but how it's going to be, whether it's the center or centrally, I can't answer that at this point. Maybe Amy can.
No,
you had a question. Okay.
I just have someone's questions online. I'll read out first, and then we can go to those. This might be a question for Erin. They're wondering, do you plan to establish a clinical research support unit to coordinate clinical research in all parts, so being ethics, study procedures, visits, and monitoring, et cetera?
So yes, there's going to be a designated clinical trials unit, which of course will incorporate clinical research. Again, the operations of that unit, we're not there yet, but there is the plan to have a much more integrated administrative profile for clinical research so that it's more streamlined than it currently is. But once the plans go in, as Beth had said, even with any of the kind of actual functioning of the building questions, we will get to that in operational planning. We just have to get the plans into the architect so we can get the building built. And all of these items will be put on the list and considered as we move through the next several years of operational planning.
Thanks. This may also be an operational question, so I understand if we're not there yet, but I'm curious nonetheless. So I'm aware of the work that's been happening within UBC Faculty of Medicine to also move towards sort of a faculty-wide approach to flexible workspaces, moving away from private offices, and some pilots that have been underway around that. So I have two questions then that relate to this. So one is, do you know yet if the flexible space that we have to book will be considered part of the wider UBC Faculty of Medicine space to book, so that anyone from within the Faculty of Medicine could book that space?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens right now. There's an online space, and anyone who's
Yeah.
associated with the Faculty of Medicine can look at any Faculty of Medicine space, actually anywhere in the province, and say, I need that meeting room for
Yeah, you can
today,
book them.
or
I would suspect, I don't know, this is
Yeah.
really a Daryl question, but when
Yeah,
we
yeah.
get to operational planning, that I'm sure,
Looking
because
at-
there's so many people that are either working on grants for UBC or employed by UBC in that space, that I can't imagine it would be significantly different than anything else.
Okay, thanks. And then the follow-up question I had was, sort of, are you aware of any sort of lessons that have been learned from some of these pilots within the Faculty of Medicine about what has worked there and not?
No, but if we can get you to connect us with who's running those pilots, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
I think Leanne had a question in the corner.
Yeah, and then I'll work my way.
Here,
Oh,
and
you
then-
got it? Okay. So then, okay. Just one person ahead.
Thank you. I have one question.
One person.
Oh.
Hi. I think you already answered it, Erin, but I was going to ask you about rooms for patients to be seen in. But I think that's going to be covered in operations. So. You asked that question?
Okay, there you go. Sorry.
Oh.
One question. Is there any biosafety level 3 library? I know many of our colleagues study focusing on COVID-19 or other infection disease, or some study focusing on the toxicity. Thank you.
Yeah, Zheng, no level 3. Remember that, because you work with me. So don't bring any level 3 organisms into these labs. Mainly all the labs at HLI are level 2 by default. There will be level 2A, I believe, and that will be it. If you want level 3, you go to UBC, the specialist laboratories out there. Okay, yeah.
Thanks. I know the discussion has been primarily about the building, but I wonder if there's been any discussion about the types of people that we might be missing that need to be recruited to make this a successful center.
There have been, because I know even for the phase 1C, the phase 1 unit that's being built at Mount St. Joseph, there's an intention to have a faculty member associated with that. You know how long it takes to raise the money. And so there definitely, I think, especially as we get into the operational planning going forward, there'll be definitely more intention put into those kind of questions about who and how. I know that we've all kind of mentioned different types of faculty we would like in there.
I assume that would be somehow, there would have to be a link between UBC and the hospital, right? Because these people are going to want to come as faculty members at UBC or
SFU or one of the other universities. Yeah. Yeah, those conversations will definitely be ongoing.
Okay.
And then just, sorry, to get back to Leanne's question, she'd asked about patient spaces. So that originally we were hoping to have the phlebotomy and interview rooms on the ground level, so that there was some that were easily accessible for especially study participants that aren't comfortable with the healthcare system. We've been unable to do that because the retail space requires that floor. So the 4th floor will have a lot of space to see study participants. And then of course there's the sky bridge going back into the hospital. So there will definitely be staff traveling into the hospital, as we currently have right now in the hospital, working on different kinds of studies.
We just have one question online that's been here for a while. So the person's wondering whether there will be centralized services provided to the groups that use this space, for example, analytical services, grants, and other shared services.
Don't know yet. I think there definitely be more integration of the services. How that will happen and how it will be provided, either on a cost recovery basis or not, we don't know yet. It'll happen during operational planning.
There might be detail coming out with the operation part, but I do love the collision that's being mentioned between clinical study and research in this talk. I'm just wondering, because majority of the wet lab, the people who are driving the wet lab are actually students and then technicians and stuff. So when we're designing the wet lab spaces, is there any consideration, maybe because you can't all put them in the wet lab and just leave them there for lunch, for doing everything. Is there anything that have been considered maybe in the dry lab next to the wet lab area? We can kind of by design to facilitate this collision of the maybe students, technicians, with more of the clinical stuff. Well, obviously also protect the patient privacy at the same time.
All the space is shared. So even if you work in a wet lab, all the amenities of the dry lab space and the innovation center are available. So you can go have your lunch in the innovation center. There's spaces, there's kitchenettes on every floor for everyone. There's less formal, more casual places to sit and collaborate. And so that's where we're expecting these sort of collisions to happen, where you get to interact with people you were not interacting with today, as Scott pointed out when he was talking.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a quick question. I know that currently St. Paul's is a vivarium, so I'm understanding that there's not going to be a vivarium in the new building.
Yeah, that's preclinical, so from level 12.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Animal.
We have another couple questions online. Someone is wondering about whether cultural awareness and humility will be factored into the design. That might be an operational question as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Another question, this might be for Scott. Is there an intent that this resource will be available to BC-based clinical stage biotechnology companies? And if so, has there been any outreach to them, both for education and input? Just someone who kind of is in both worlds and has only been informed internally as a faculty member.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So, I think we have to go back in time, right? The original intent when we were going to build the new research part of the new hospital was going to be a public-private partnership with industry or developers, and we were going to have multiple towers built where these types of things would happen, right? Now, that didn't go forward, and what we have now is have one building that basically is publicly funded only, effectively publicly funded, and so that has this sort of it takes on the functional program of what we have right now here, right, including clinical spaces. And now the only thing that would probably fit with what the question is there's this innovation center as well, and that could be where early sort of biotech or collaborations with biotech would happen. That level. So that's the innovation level. I think that's one level down from most of the wet labs. Yeah.
I was going to say too, that this is a big campus, and the intention is to have all of the innovation in buildings that are adjacent or close to each other. So I don't think we're really actually privy at all to any of those conversations at this point, but that's the intention, is to, of course, welcome in the life sciences community, not necessarily into this particular building, but into the footprint of the space. We're hoping it'll be open in 2028. We have to be out of this space by 2029. So
What's the timeline for the hospital? It will get moving first.
2027.
So we are a year after.
Probably a year and possibly a bit more.
Devang answered that question online. He
Okay,
said
perfect.
early 2029.
Okay.
Spring 2020.
Definitely.
Before 2030.
And I guess we'll wrap that up now. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, we're sorry the pizza was late. Thank you to everybody online for participating. And I want to thank both Scott and Beth for, of course, presenting, and look for us again. We'll be providing updates periodically as we move through this process. So thank you.